I've asked this panel to give their personal view on our theme of this conference, the breakthrough of language intelligence, and to put a few words around the highlights of 2024. And in no particular order, we will start with Oddmund.
Yes, so for 2024, and I think I've been in technology for a long time and also in Typify for 10 years, but it's never been as interesting now with AI coming and speech-to-speech or AI speech has been like, I would say 24 will be remembered as the year when it really started and took off. We're still at the beginning, but that's my take for 2024, just in a short sentence.
And I'm sure we will learn much more about that during these 2 days. Gerd.
Yes, hello everybody. I wanted to talk about technology, but when you talk about technology, things get very technical very quickly and people may not follow. So I decided to talk a bit about what I think is the limit of AI, the limit of language models. And I think that's the human. And that's one of the things we will talk about, I hope, these 2 days.
And Christoph.
Thank you. You see, one of the advantages of getting a little bit older is that you can look back in history, and we are now into the, I don't know, 3rd or 4th wave of the AI will take over the world. And I remember very well that in the old days when Gerhard and I were working at IBM and working on the first trigram language models invented by Fred Jelinek. I mean, it sounded like magic, and this was the day when he started firing the linguists and the speech recognition got better. I think we are in super interesting times, as was said already, and I wonder whether how far AI will drag us this time around. I think it's entered the mainstream, and never before so much money has been invested into pushing AI forward. So one could come to the conclusion that AI will, stay at the level that it is now, and we hear every now and then that not too much progress is made with adding more data, just because pretty much all the data is already trained into the models. There's others who say that there's big things coming. Obviously, I don't know the answer, but it's probably wise to prepare ourselves for different outcomes, like everybody who is in business and in defense plans for various situations. I think we should also think about and plan for various situations, depending on where AI will lead us this time.
Samuel.
Right. So for me, 2024 has been the year where machine learning techniques like CPO have made it possible to do exciting stuff that you can do with very large language models with smaller language models. So in translation, for example, well, you mentioned ALMA before. It was shown that you can actually do with, 12 billion parameter model what you can do with GPT-4, which is allegedly 100 times bigger. And this will have a lot of impact, I assume. I mean, we all know that OpenAI and these companies are burning lots of money, lots of energy with what they're doing, so we can talk about societal impact. But it has an economic impact, of course. Like I come from an LSP. It's no coincidence that companies like Translated and also Unbubble shortly actually launched their public platforms for translation, and others will follow, and that's possible exactly because of techniques like that. And so we're going to follow, other LSPs will follow, and probably in 2-3 years, LSPs will really be language software providers.
Yeah, for me, 24 is the year where the vision became more concrete, more tangible, that language intelligence plus well-maintained linguistic assets, I call it LangOps, allow enterprises to run on unstructured data the same way they did already or have been successfully run on structured data in ERP systems.
So some of these statements now should be the opening of the moderated discussions we're going to have. I will try to do that in kind of 3 steps. So try to open the space a little bit, look at all the opportunities, and then also look at the concerns, the limitations that we of course also, and last not least, look ahead. What is, so as I said, that we are not under or overestimating what comes out of this. So let's start with the endless opportunities I was talking about, and about the true power of multilingual AI, and also beyond translation. Most of us come from somehow a translation or linguistic background. But let's look beyond the single purpose, the multimodality of this technology. So throwing out to you guys, how do we actually make the most of multilingual AI? What do we need to understand, like, fundamentally? We started looking at, maybe Gerd, we can start with you. I mean, you said MT versus LLM. So where are we in that stage? TMs, TB, MT?
Yeah. So I think that MT systems, statistical systems, are a bit outdated, but still do a pretty good job because they are very controlled. If you look at what LLMs produce, there's surprises in there. So if you think about making a production system work, then a statistical model is much more safe. Plus, it's also smaller, it's cheaper, training goes faster, and when you train faster and you test things, which you always have to do, and it doesn't work out like you were hoping it would be, you don't throw away this much money. I think this is one of the problems that we have with LLMs, that if you train an LLM and that machine has been running for days, weeks, the preparation of it has taken months, maybe a year, and then you do the testing and things are revealed that you don't like, well, then you have a problem because you have to throw away an awful lot of money. And that's something you don't have when you work with statistical models. So that's why I said I prefer statistical in a production environment. Also, I think that we have a lot of trust in the large language models because we're surprised by what they can do, by the answers you get. But if you do little experiments, like you make a quiz, the models are perfect for saying, well, give me 50 questions, interesting questions. But then if you say, well, and now give me for every question 4 possible answers, well, often the real answer is not even in those 4. It's just made up. And of course, you can prompt the system to do it correctly, but that takes a lot of time, and we're wasting also at the user side a lot of energy in creating good and reliable prompts. So my kids are surprised by the fact that when they ask 3 LLMs the same question, 2 LLMs answer more or less the same thing, and the 3rd LLM is actually right. And that's a bit annoying. So yeah, I think things will change in 2025 when we implement the looking forward in the transformer models, which isn't in there today, I understand, but that will happen. Today we only look back when we build up, when we predict the next word. So I think the models will get better, but yeah, it's all to be tested.
Yeah, I don't know if you all agree. Samuel, I think maybe you shook your head a little bit. I don't know. I remember, I think actually Joao from Unbabel, he wrote an article not so long ago saying that, I mean, just the fact that all the research now is going into LLMs, there will be no MT. What do you think?
Well, to Gab's point, I think it always helps when dealing with LLMs to treat them like human beings. So when you have these 3 questions and you get 3 different answers, one is wrong, well, that could be an experience you have when you ask 3 humans. And that's the way how when we design workflows and think about how to use LLMs, I always think about, okay, I treat them like a human, and if I have a human and the human doesn't have the knowledge, the human also will have a hard time. But if I add that knowledge in one way or the other, then the human will produce the right answer and give it to me in a nice sentence. And in that way, LLMs are masters. So it's always the combination of different systems putting together. And I think the word out, and it's also my own experiences, that when you work with LLMs in producing content, in translating, in writing code, or whatever you're doing, you are on a junior level. So somebody who has 12 months experience in the job, maybe it's pushed soon to 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And that's already incredible to have such assistant on your side basically for free. And I think that's the revolution we're talking about. And thinking a bit outside the translation box, you said beyond translation, it allows us, what I said in my initial statement, to deal with unstructured data. Half of the data companies or we are dealing with in organizations is not numeric. Whatever you can put in tables, we know how to deal with. Whatever you can't put into tables, typically humans deal with in meetings, in reports, phone calls, emails, whatever. And that's labor intensive and extremely inefficient. Now we have the tools to change that, and I think this will create an incredible revolution which goes way beyond making translation a bit more efficient.
Can I just add to that? So you mentioned LLMs is like talking to a human. I would say it's more like adding to a child, and you need additional methods to actually get the right answers out of it. And so I think a big underestimated part is prompt engineering. So getting the questions right and setting the boundaries in a way that the childish like model is forced to answer in a way like you wanted to answer. And true, yeah, true. Or if that is not enough, adapting the model to your needs. And I think we hear tomorrow from Gerhard things about RAG implementations and how to like push models into directions that they can actually be useful.
Yeah, Ottmund, please add to the multimodality, which is more than text.
Yeah, I'll maybe from the interpreting perspective, and I find it interesting, the LLM, they are more human-like. And if you listen to, let's say, German interpretation now, when we're speaking in English, it's a very direct translation, and it's not like an interpreter. Interpreters summarize. So we want to use the nature of the LLM, the human nature of the LLM to make it sound and work more like an interpreter. And that's where we want to work with the industry, because interpreters so far have said, no, we're not going to touch this. We actually want to work and see how can we mimic and use this human version of the LLMs to make it work like an interpreter, because the needs out there are 10, 20 times more than they are today. And we saw that with translation also once machine translation came. Today there is 100 times more documents translated than 20 years ago. So.
We had an interesting experience, which is probably 20 years ago, when we prepared training data for speech recognizers. And when you prepare training data for speech recognizers, you need to have a very, very exact transcript, like word for word. And even when somebody takes a breath or makes a lip smack, all of that needs to be put into the training data. And at one time, instead of transcriptionists, we used people who were trained with doing subtitles on TV, because we thought they would be cool, they would be fast. And it turns out that the subtitles on TV is not a word-by-word transcript. It's actually, it's abbreviations, it's changing of a little bit of meaning even, because these people are trained to be one, fast, and secondly, to be readable on the screen as quickly as possible. And so it was quite fascinating, this difference between having just a word-by-word transcript and having an actual, something that is well readable. And language models are doing exactly that.
I would like to add something to what Jochen said. So LLMs are very good in reading unstructured data and bringing structure to it. There's a second use case that I find mind-blowing, which is you can ask an LLM to read structured data. But structured data, when it's like a JSON file, it can be, it's not like a table. It may be a table in a table in a table, and there may be different tables in different parts of a JSON file. And that's very difficult for humans, for developers, and even machines to work with. But with an LLM, you can ask to extract the data that you need from this kind of structured data. And I think this is very nice.
Samuel, you were grabbing the mic. Do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, but it was more to the previous points, I guess, if you don't mind. Because you're right, I wouldn't necessarily agree with all of you said about the NMT, SMT versus LLM game. Then again, I feel we should maybe focus a bit less on, the models behind things and more the tasks at hand, because what I would certainly agree is that with SMT 15 years ago, you could show you can make professionals more effective at translation. It just, people believed it less and now they believe it more. But I mean, when we talk about the tools that people use, CAT tools, for example, I mean, of course, when you strip away the layout, you tear out all the images and whatnot of a text you want to translate, and then you send it to some model, regardless of whether it's an SMT or an LLM-based system. I mean, that will certainly harm things, and I think this is not the way forward, actually. I think things will need to change there. I'm sorry I'm coming back to translation now, but with the CAT tools we use these days in the industry, I mean, we can exactly not benefit from this whole multimodality and all of that. So, and that's something that concerns me, and I think that will need to change.
Yeah.
But you're actually a dog person, but
I would like to add one example of this as well. Many years ago, my team was doing the translations of automotive manuals. And one of the problems we faced is that when you work with a CAT tool, you take out the images, you focus on the text, the translators see the text, but they no longer see what is in the image. Of course, they can look at the PDF file that you created, look up the image, and do the translation. But how many people were doing this? So we had a QC round for this, where we printed the PDF, and then we manually looked if everything was fine. This is a step that today you can do with LLMs as well.
Yeah, I think this is really as we said, the power, and also, as you said, Oddmund, there, I mean, it becomes extremely complex if you also want to have voice and speech and other parts of the human experience into that. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. What is actually now the next level? How do we actually inform our AIs even better? Is it RAG? Is it we will have a lot of discussions around that later on. I know knowledge graphs or contrastive preference optimization. What is it? How do we actually go about this to take the first step to make this usable for us?
Well, my honest answer is we are all experimenting. So we try RAG, we try knowledge graphs, we try many things, and at the same time the models continue to develop. So very often if you produce certain results, then there's a new model and you can restart all your tests. I would say we are in the process of figuring it out, but I think it's clear that the LLMs on their own can't do it. Again, the comparison with a human, if you have a human who's capable of speaking language, of understanding language, of reading some articles, doing some research, and then writing something new. I think all this the LLM can do, but the human doesn't work in isolation. The human talks to other people, reads stuff, and so on. And that's what we need to complement. In what form? Probably in many forms, in form of already existing content, in form of structured data, in form of knowledge graphs. And then it's, in the end, then engineering and plumbing, how to put all this together for the task at hand to get the optimum result. I think the mistake many people are making, particularly in management, is that they're saying, oh, now I have this LLM, it can do everything, I can throw everything away, and then of course the results will be disappointing. It's not that easy. It takes way more to do it, but if you do this way more, then the results are truly amazing and of course increase productivity incredible.
Yeah, and I would guess also, Gert, as you with your example with the PDF, I mean, there's also something to be optimized, let's say, like that in terms of workflows and processes, right? I mean, how can we enrich, let's say, not only the linguist experience, but the experience of the user, that it becomes almost a, you know, one universe that that you don't need to think about the different parts of the process.
Yeah, so I think that next year will be the year of the agents. And one of the agents that I think will be built, there's many already in the making and we're testing some of them, are LLMs that, or agents that do some kind of project management, where basically the thinking that a human is doing when they organize translation workflows is done by, are done by agents. I must honestly say that I don't trust this yet, because translation work, organizing translation work has become very, very complicated over the years. When I said the limit of AI is actually the human, we can see this. When we started to test LLMs in 2018, we were working with what we call low-hanging fruit. But today, if we are testing what LLMs produce, we need specialists. They will find the mistakes, because the mistakes are no longer made on language level, they're made on knowledge level. And then you need a specialist to understand what's going wrong. And in the past, when we worked with people that had only language skills, there was a lot of competition, and that made that you can try to buy good value for money. Today, if we work with specialists to evaluate what comes out of machines, we work with very expensive people. And that is changing a lot. So it's also giving back, in a way, the value to the humans that have the knowledge.
So you mentioned agents. I think one of the particular issues that we particularly see in our industry, and I'm talking about defense industry, is that our users would like to ask the system not questions about half a year ago, because that is usually the cutoff you have with the bigger language models, but you want to they want to ask questions that are very, very recent, like an hour ago or even 10 minutes ago. So the big question is, how do you overcome that limitation? And one option is obviously to use agents to look up in the internet or look up on social media and see where the latest information comes from. Maybe have models that are watching TV day and night, and get the transcripts of that TV in multiple languages, and then being able to ask in your language and get the appropriate answers. Maybe to make it faster, you can either build a RAG model out of that continuously, or just put it into a prompt if it's not too big. But then again, we see that there are models coming left and right with quite big prompts, so you can put thousands and thousands of tokens, maybe megabytes, mega tokens in the future into the prompting. So it's all very dynamic, and in the defense space a little bit different than in the translation space, because in the translation space you kind of have your, the stuff that you want to translate. In defense, things are moving quite rapidly. We just heard the news about cut undersea cables and stuff. This is exactly what our analysts would like to ask the system about, and obviously we cannot wait for Meta or anybody else to finish training that we can answer these questions.
Oddmund, do you see agents also work in your, let's say, more combined space? I mean, it's unpredictable what people are saying, right?
We see it also working in our space. I just wanted to make a comment from our side that most of the model and tools we're looking for are not made for real time. They are made for translation and batch jobs. So I'm encouraging the industry to think in real time, because that's where the consumers are going, the people are going, where the value is. So when making tools, great tools, and we are experimenting with which ones are the best. So try and make it real time, because then we'll use them in a big way.
Thank you, and let us just take the opportunity to welcome Manuel. There has been some kind of disruption somewhere, I'm pretty sure. Manuel is the founder and CEO of Pangeanic, and you also have a long career in NLP and language technologies. Welcome, Manuel.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a little reception. I'll tell you later. But I'm sorry. I'm usually not late, but
So I'm sure that you can catch up. Now wrapping up this, let's say, looking into the opportunities, obviously a question is, what are the drivers of all this? What are the most prevalent business drivers you see, or maybe even on the dark side, Christoph, more the geopolitical or macroeconomic drivers here? My brother works in the German intelligence, and he says, no, it's not money that drives the world, it's actually information. So I don't know if you agree with that. But what do you see is actually driving the development here? I mean, if we follow the money.
the question for me?
Anyone.
You said the information. Your brother works for yeah, I have some relatives that work in information. Some people might argue that it's love that drives the world.
I like that.
But anyway, that's a different discussion. Yes, of course, it's information, good information, and that is one of the reasons why you have a big push for fake news, to make people harder and harder to understand what is real or not real. Since the advent of LLMs, we've been testing new frontiers into what it is real or not real, and fluency. One of my mottos from last year is that language is no longer human, that we have machines that can produce human language. Not reasoning. Reasoning is a different discussion. But certainly language at a speed and fluency that no human can, number one. Now, with that language that you produce comes information. So you now have the ability to produce massive amounts of information or disinformation. And well, just a recap on the conversation on agents. I think we are maturing now. We've tested the frontiers, the dust is settling, and we know what is possible, feasible, and can be packaged as a product with LLMs. And LLMs are one of the pieces in the puzzle. That the next generation, or the real application in the market for intelligence agents. Now, my scientists will kill me if I say agents. They say that is a marketing term, and they've spent 5 or 6 years studying at universities. We call them workflows and graphs, okay, not agents, and that is an old science. Hope that answers the question.
I think anyone else want to add to what will be driving us rather than we drive it?
So the thing which always amazes me is that combined human plus LLM, we're not talking about being 10, 20, 30% faster, but often it turns a 1x developer into a 10x developer. and 1x content creator and a 10x content creator, and typically improvements are 10%, 15, something like this. But here we are talking about multiples, and whenever you have multiples, disruption follows right away.
I want to say something about the challenge that we will have in the translation business. And that is something that our LMs are good at and not good at the same time, which is handling ambiguity. And for instance, one of the things that my team is doing a lot these days is truth finding. Is this true or is this not true, what an LLM has produced? And we humans are not very good in handling ambiguity either. So, for example, if the statement is, Trump has said that they're eating the dogs, is this true or not? Well, thing is, it is true because he said it. But of course, what he said is not true. And this ambiguity in a sentence is very difficult for LLMs to handle correctly when you use them for translation. And I think this is one of the challenges that we have next year, is handling this kind of insight. And I think that a very good statement was made a couple of years ago when Jeff Bezos was talking about LLMs. He said, we did not invent LLMs. We are discovering LLMs. We're trying to figure out what we can and cannot do with this. And I think we have a revolution now, but we still need some time to figure out where we can use all this technology for in a safe way.
Jochen, you just said that, yeah, we are all experimenting, we are all looking into this, but how do we actually get enterprise ready, as people will ask? So how do we go from pilot to scale? Is it good enough to experiment, or?
I call it open heart surgery. So, I mean, building test cases and test pipelines is as much or often more effort than just putting it at work. And while you experiment with it, produce the data in real production to see what is the right way to go. I know many companies, particularly in Germany, which tend to be rather conservative, who are saying, well, we are still observing, we don't know yet, when is a good time to jump in. I think this is suicidal, because they already lost 2 years of collecting very valuable experiences. You have to do it now, experiment, put it at work, and then optimize while you go.
Can I please buy you a beer later? I would totally agree. And I think this is so important. And this is actually one of the areas, like, you can't really just look at this and observe anymore. And I think this is where this hype that's always talked about when we talk about AI and LLMs these days, this can actually help, in my opinion. Of course, there's hype and the C-suite is, you know, fearful or whatever feelings they have, and they run to their CTOs and they're like, oh, you know, build something, I want to do something. And then the teams will complain, but I think it's right, and we need to start somewhere. You call it open heart surgery, I would agree, but I think that's certainly better than just waiting and seeing what happens.
Yeah, and on the other side is, and Manuel, I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this as well, is then of course also what are the more ethical or societal concerns that we have here? I mean, I see a lot of the technologies are now driven by the wish to produce a lot in no time. The productivity is driving a lot of this. But then again, what does that then mean to the future of our content? I mean, does it matter if we have content that is, you know, generated or humanly created? And there are also a lot of other concerns. I mean, there are the low resource languages, there is cultural diversity. I mean, there are a lot of deep concerns that we also need to think about, and the need to act now. Is there a challenge here that we might say, we don't need to think about this yet, or?
Yeah, I think Jochen pointed to open heart surgery. That's a good analogy. McKinsey says that only about 9 or 10% of AI POCs actually make it to production, and Gartner says more or less the same, so 11 or 12%. So there must be something intrinsically interestingly, wrong. Either people are not focusing on the right POCs and deployments, or the expectations are too high, or perhaps all the scientists don't know how to manage the technology. But let me ask the audience, what can go wrong with a technology that has been created by crawling the web since 1999 and having all sort of informations from the normal web,
Like
the dark web,
OTMs.
and then putting that in production? What can go wrong? Tell me. Nobody in, certainly I wouldn't, nobody in his right or her right mind would do that with a product. Because where comes the testing? I do see all applications in, for example, in generation. Fine. Scaling 10. Okay, we can produce 10 times, 100 times more content. We can summarize 10 times, 1,000 times with better computers on the one hand. And then second, ethical concerns and lower resource languages. I happen to come from a bilingual region where we speak Spanish and Catalan, both of all my searches are either in English or Spanish, because what I'm going to retrieve in Catalan is close to worthless. And that's not an official EU language, but you have official languages like Lithuanian, Latvian, etc. In the Baltics, they have no chance of having reliable information unless it's a translation from the English. My heart's divided really between, yes, we have to do something, and we do something. And I think the secret of the pudding, the proof of the pudding really is customization. It's having all these huge corporate, all the abilities, but only for one specific use case. So I'm going to deploy this for my pharmaceutical company, okay, with the right agents, with the right filters, etc. But not AI in general. We can't say, okay, let's give everything to ChatGPT. ChatGPT knows everything. Well, it doesn't.
Well, the internet also doesn't know anything, and there's lots of misinformation, but all the companies adopted it, right? So.
Oh, misinformation, that was the key word here for Christoph.
I've been waiting for that one. So again, let's look at the thing from a defense standpoint, and I mean like defense of democracy, not military defense, but things like information manipulation, things like interference. There's a beautiful word, by the way. It's called FIMI, and FIMI stands for Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference. So it's a beautiful word for something very bad, narratives and propaganda. Undermining democratic values, and when we look what is going on the internet, we just hear that many people are leaving X, former Twitter, because it's become so toxic that many people don't want to be there anymore. But what I want to come to is that it has become crazy easy for a malicious actor to swamp the internet with text, and you don't care whether it's completely correct or not. If you got like 90% of your fake content out there in form of text, in form of images, in form of video, in form of audio, even music, it is hugely distracting, and there's really very little you can do about this. There used to be a formula that says to debunk one false information on the internet, you need 10x the time and the efforts to counteract that. Now, if you don't have a human as on the other side, but a machine that is probably even 100x quicker than a human, you can just imagine how difficult it is to work against such a flood of misinformation and disinformation. So I think we need more tools. We need other tools. We need automatic tools to counteract those. I have no solution for that, but we see what's going on in the world to get a feeling of what lies ahead of us.
Yeah, I think you're really touching upon some of the concerns that we all have, and we feel kind of helpless. On the other hand, I mean, these exact tools could also be the solution if we do it right. But let's try to have a little bit of an outlook. So where do we go from here? if this is, as I said, the next industrial revolution, then what would it actually take from us? I mean, there needs to be some kind of new systemic foundation, I guess. So infrastructure, architecture, but also funding and regulation. Where can we start? You mentioned Germany, which is a sad example of doing nothing in many ways. But I think I mean, also in wider Europe. I attended a conference last week where also the European Commission stated that I mean, language intelligence is part of, you know, winning the digital leadership in the world. But has the ship sailed, or what do we need?
I'm afraid the ship has sailed, and I think every startup which is founded in Berlin and funded with like 10 million or so, 30% of that money goes right away to California in forms of Google ads or Facebook ads, and I'm afraid that another 20% in future will go also to California for AI computing. And it's very hard to catch up because, as you mentioned before, it's billions and billions which are invested. And Philip and me, when we were still having these summits in Brussels, we were heavy lobbying, and I think we were kind of successful, but what we got out of all this lobbying effort were millions. And, well, that's a joke, basically. And unfortunately, there's no real industry policy done in the EU. So I think we are left to make smart use of this technology, as many startups do for e-commerce, online shops, and so on. But we will have to pay a tax to our Californian overlords.
I do agree with this, yet I want to make a remark. I think a lot of the experience that we have, that we get today with English-based LLMs will be to our advantage, because in Europe we have a lot of languages, and I think there is value in creating small language models or large language models for these smaller languages, but we can benefit from all the experience we got with the English language models. So I think that a lot of companies building LLMs today are throwing away money, and we are late in the race. I totally agree, but maybe we will spend less money or waste less money when we go to the smaller languages. That's the hope that I have.
Yeah, and I think also I mean, we all need to ask ourselves, I mean, this is not someone else's problem. So we all need to ask ourselves, so what is our respective responsibility here, as both as professionals and also humans, or even nations? So the question is really, are we doing enough? Do you see that from a big, maybe governmental or defense perspective? Do you see in these on very uncertain times, are we doing enough?
Well, the LLMs currently is a game of big money. We're talking billions and billions and billions of euros that are being invested, and we don't have this kind of money as venture capital in Europe, as simple as that. So that is primarily American money being spent. Then on the other side, there is, for whatever reasons, there are open models that everybody can use, and they are not too far behind. I'm always surprised what comes out as open models, so I would say that we are somewhere maybe 3 months, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's less. There's the difference between the open models and the proprietary models. And the open models can be used by pretty much everybody. With not too much money, even when I think about the Llama 3.270 billion model, that's the second biggest from Meta. It's not the very biggest, but the second biggest from Meta. You can run on 2 4090 cards at home with a 8,000 euros rig with reasonable speed. And if you want to go to the big model, you will have to spend 100,000 euros. But that is something that we can afford in Europe. So I'm not too pessimistic in that regard. And also what we will see is that I expect some of these bubbles to burst. There will be a few companies that have spent a lot of money and who just cannot monetize it. So we will see bankruptcies, we will see things being open sourced. So I think the next year will be super, super interesting in many ways, not only technically, but also in terms of business.
Yeah, I don't look at it that black because you said OpenAI make a lot of money. They actually lose a lot of money. Very few.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, so we are actually using them, but we are close to the customer. The customers are here, and the biggest added value, the 90%, maybe we have a 10% tax on to the US, but the 90% we're making here being close to the customer, knowing the languages, and my concern a little bit at the moment are these other languages than Spanish, French, and English, because the demand out there, we have demands all over Asia and all over the world, and will these languages catch up? But I do think that 10% tax I'd pay, they can have the headache with it, we'll make the money on the rest. So.
Okay. Let me draw an analogy here. The two major operating systems, OS operating systems, are Microsoft and Mac. They're both American. Everybody uses them. Does that provide any kind of technical disadvantage to nations? Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that you depend on somebody else's operating system. No, because it's a creative system. You can do things with the operating system. I think something similar will happen to LLMs. We're at the peak of well, we're at the peak, but somewhere around the peak of expectations. There are a number of open source LLMs. I don't know what the strategy of Meta is, releasing so many open source LLMs, but certainly there must be a strategy there. You don't do it because, well, Zuckerberg probably has enough money to spare building LLMs, and it's an ego project. But there will be enough smaller LLMs and technologies that I agree, not so far behind, that you can retrain. Barcelona Supercomputing Center is releasing translation models, and Babel has customized translation. Then it's not so difficult to do. And then you have good software. There is a specialist software that solves a problem. And that's really, I think that is the key issue. Not building the next Microsoft operating, not the next Mac OS, but building solutions to problems on those platforms.
Good. On that positive note, let's spend a few minutes on audience questions as well. I don't know if there are in the Slido. Otherwise, I mean, I guess we can also you can just raise your hand if possible.
Yeah, thanks for the nice talk. I have one question about investment. So we talked about large language models being a huge investment, but there's also a huge investment for small companies to apply it to their use case. We talked about POCs, 90% fail, and I also see a lot of waste of money in randomly setting up POCs which don't work out, and then you throw it away. There's no real improvement. So is it really the way to go to set up 100 POCs for everybody? Or maybe the smartest way is to wait until the POCs turn into production-ready systems and approaches?
Yeah, very brief quote. We've been involved in a number of POCs. The trouble with the POCs is that people making the decision don't know what they're doing, typically. They're not familiar with the technology, and the expectations are too high. Anything is possible with AI, so they ask for I don't know, a visual recognition system or an audio interpreting or simultaneous interpreting with a budget, and it's not realistic. It's not realistic. But my message is people making decisions or driving those budgets are not well informed about the limits and the possibilities of the technology.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. I have two questions, if I may. One to Samuel, going back to earlier in the discussion. What makes the change from LLM to SLM? And the second to Gert, if I may, you were saying that the human is the limit of the AI, but what happens next? I mean, once AI goes beyond the human, aren't we in danger? Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm the right person to answer this. Okay. I don't think I'm the right person to answer this. Sorry if someone else.
Maybe I didn't make myself clear. You were saying that now we have small language models doing as good as the large language models. So my question was, what made that happen?
So the techniques I was talking about?
Yeah, how did it happen, this magic?
Well, I guess there's, well, we could discuss, okay, maybe I am the right person to talk to you for longer. But so, I mean, obviously there's two sides, right? So first of all, if you want to specialize an LLM to do one task specifically, you know, like say translation, and it's not about summarization and, you know, image recognition and whatnot. Of course, you can like gear this and like condense things a bit better. And there's like all these techniques like CPO, and we've mentioned a few, but I think it's a bit too much here. I'm not generally saying a small LLM will be able to do everything the biggest LLM can do, but like in certain domains and tasks, I guess that's relatively logical.
And I want to add one more thing to this. So you have indeed the reorganization of what an LLM will do, and we have a week ago, I think, the first LLM to really translate was created, was published. We haven't played with this yet. But I also think that we are quantizing LLMs, which means we're going from 32-bit to 16-bit to 8-bit to 4-bit, even to 1-bit now, very experimental. And the quality is going down, but it's not going down so incredible. So for instance, the 70-bit model from Llama would perform, when you quantize to 1-bit, it would perform like a 7-bit, the 70 billion parameter model. So this technology is still very new, but give it a year and it will be magic. And we will be running even large LLMs on small devices. But large LLMs are for generic things, but small LLMs will be for very specific tasks.
We have two more questions. I had a question about the American approach to LLM. The big tech approach is, you know, lots of computers, lots of data, and
lots of money.
And lots of money, which is not possible by most of the world, where the need for some of the benefits that LLMs produce is great. And there have been recently some initiatives, like in the United Arab Emirates, they have a model that is 50% Arabic, 50% English, and it does much better on Arabic and much more sensitive to the variance of Arabic as well, in terms of producing output that is useful to Arabic input. There's in India, there's a couple of LLM initiatives also that
in China,
much smaller models and much more effective in those local languages. And there's, of all of them, the smallest ones are in Africa, where they have built with very scarce compute resources, very scarce data resources. They're engineering new approaches. That's not all about scales. I was curious, is there any kind of attempt like this in Europe, you know, where you have so much of the data, because you look for data, you look for compute, and you look for this expertise together? And
anyone very short answer?
Sure. Yes, there is. There's been a couple of initiatives for smaller languages, low resource languages. We were involved in the Catalan LLM with Barcelona Supercomputing Center, and they do work. The models tend to be 7Bs, again, and I'll leave it there because then I would go into quantization and smaller language models.
You get the last one.
Thank you, Britta. I have a question for you, Manuel. You said before something which sort of really frightened me. I was sort of thinking, I said, okay, if this is what Manuel is saying is true, this is like really frightening. Okay, so my question is the following. Will LLMs lead to a faster dying of smaller languages? Because you said nowadays when people, from a small language, they say, my mother tongue is Danish. Danes, they don't look for something in Danish because the amount of articles is too small. Mm-hmm. And it's already happening. It's not, it's lower in Google, mm-hmm. The ranking, because I think Danes they go straight to English. Mm-hmm. The Norwegians, they have more articles in Norwegian. And, I see like in Switzerland, I live in Switzerland, there's Reto Romanisch, 60,000 or 30,000 people, and half of them work for the television channel. So they make television for the other half. And
the other half watch them.
Yeah, and it's a lost battle, and the Swiss they don't want to realize it. They're keen on putting money into that. But if what you're saying is true, is like sort of middle-sized languages, like the Scandinavian languages, or Irish, or there's a high. Will they die faster?
Okay, the short answer is if there is political will, no, they will not die.
Political, yeah.
And Curity has partially answered your question, because there are initiatives in Africa for the ultra-resource languages that can have their own models. As long as there is data and there is political will, people will build their models. Nothing stops Denmark or Reto Romanisch people stopping their work at the television broadcaster or using that data with. The tools are there. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Laszlo from NIMSI, and I'm probably cutting into my own time because I'm the next presenter. So, Johan, you mentioned open heart surgery. The way I look at this is kind of like space exploration. When we shoot out the Voyager, it goes at a certain speed. But in 20 years' time, we can send out another probe that's going a lot faster. It's going to catch up in 2 years. Why did we send the Voyager in the first place, right? But the challenge is exactly that, is future-proofing. So do you, gentlemen on the panel, have any suggestions for future-proofing language technology solutions, and especially implementations, knowing that the foundational landscape is very dynamic and changing rapidly?
Well, I can give you some IT engineering answer. We try to build systems in a very modular way where it's easy to exchange the modules. So we try to make it language agnostic and also language independent. And if a new LLM is coming out or some new technology, well, then I just replace that machine. And so as long as you build an architecture that way, and not fundamentally different capabilities are coming, which would have to change the whole workflow, we are kind of future safe.
I want to add to this one more thing. I think the future is for those companies that hire very smart people that figure out how to do testing. Because failing fast will also mean that you can fail cheaply. And I think that's a key skill that you would need to hire for.
That sounds like a Silicon Valley statement. Anyway, thank you very much. I actually asked you to prepare some kind of closing statement. We will not have time to that because Laszlo took all of it. I want to thank you, all of you. I think this is a proof that we humans are actually not very good at understanding exponential, but at least we tried. And that the challenges are indeed very complex and endless, but the opportunities are also. But I believe personally that conversations like this can actually help us to propel us forward. So thank you, everyone. And I know that you all know that there is so much knowledge in this room, and all the sessions that we'll have today and tomorrow will be way above my head, at least. So thank you all, and have a great conference.